What's up, marketing maniacs, and welcome back to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand, your ultimate BFF in the wide world of digital marketing. Join me, your host, Nicholas Kuhner, spilling the beans on the juiciest trends and hottest tips to up your marketing game. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand with your host, Nicholas Kuhner. And today we have got Michael Kammleitner, all the way out of Vienna in Austria, not Australia, for those of you who don't know where it is. I'm sure you haven't heard that one before. Michael is the founder of swat.io as well as walls.io. So we're going to talk about walls.io and how user-generated content can be used to build your business profile. We're going to talk a little bit about SaaS, or software as a service. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges competing in such a crowded space and how Michael is differentiating himself in this space. And then probably some of the challenges of startups and getting talent and growing your business. So Michael, excellent to have you on board with us.
Hi, Nicholas. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone listening.
So before we go into walls.io, which is very exciting, can we go back into your background a little bit? Now, for those of you who don't know SaaS or software as a service, everything like ChatGPT, your accounting systems, your any types of systems like that is software as a service. Even Canva is software as a service. So that's the kind of space that we're working in. And obviously it's grown over the years, but it's a very tough space because you don't always have face-to-face contact with your customers. So let's maybe talk about your background and how did you decide to get into the software business?
Oh, so that was a pretty obvious decision, as I'm a trained software developer myself. I have been coding for the better part of my life. Started very early, spent some years school learning, programming, then later, of course, working in various companies, software agencies as an employee. So it was only just a natural path for me to cross over from programmer to being an entrepreneur and trying to build a business on top of these skills.
So a lot of entrepreneurs that I've spoken to have come from industries that are not marketing. So now that you are an entrepreneur, you probably thought all these marketing people were a waste of time, or, why are we paying these guys so much money? How has your view of the importance of marketing changed since you became an entrepreneur?
Actually, I have to object. I love marketing and loved it almost since the beginning, I would like to say. Almost, not totally. There's two things to mention here. I pretty soon realized that I'm not the best coder in the world. I mean, who is? And that I'm more like a universalist. That was one of the reasons I wanted to start my own business, my own company at first. And secondly, what got me really excited in 2008, I think, and what really was the tipping point where I actually decided, hey, I quit my job and start to be a freelancer in software development, was the launching or the appearance of social media platforms, social media APIs. In particular, Facebook was the first platform to really open up towards every little small indie developer like me. Suddenly I was able to put my web app, not on my own domain, on my own website, but on top of facebook.com. And even though I was a 100% developer back then with no big marketing background, I intuitively understood that putting my software on top of such a huge platform makes it suddenly discoverable. Suddenly people can find it, can use it. Plus the viral effects that social media marketing was promising. That was all reasons why I completely fell into that rabbit hole and started to explore these opportunities. And that's also where I understood how important marketing is.
Vienna is not thought of necessarily as the tech hub of the world. That's more seen as coming out of the States. But I have actually spoken to quite a few programmers coming out of Vienna. What is happening in Vienna that there are all of these startups and this focus on tech?
Yeah, so I've been around all my life and watching the startup scene consciously since 15 plus years now. And while your assertion is true, you wouldn't think of Vienna. If you think startup hub in Europe, you wouldn't think of Vienna at first, or necessarily. That's true still. But we did come a long way in the last 10 to 15 years. So when I started out, there was almost no startup culture. There was no VC money in Austria. That changed. All of that changed by now. And I would say that Austria, in particular Vienna now, is a solid place for startups to work, to found a company, to start a startup startup is totally viable today in Vienna. Also, of course, because funding is much more international these days. So in 2010, when I started out, it was way harder to talk to a US-based VC while being in Vienna. That's, of course, much easier now. It's much easier now to set up a company in America and look for funding in America. So basically, the worlds came together in the last 15 years.
It's quite interesting. Now, let's talk about walls.io. Can you give our listeners an overview of what the platform is and what it does and what value it's got?
So walls.io is a user-generated content platform that allows marketers to use authentic content, authentic messages, videos, photos from social media platforms and reuse it, utilize it to drive and reach their marketing goals. What does it mean in a particular use case? For example, an event marketing professional might collect all the posts on X, on Instagram, on TikTok for their event hashtag. They might curate this content and then put it out either on a big digital signage display at the venue, or they might use the content on their registration website to drive ticket sales, or they just want to provide this content after the event for people to enjoy the memories of the great event. So that is one particular use case, how event marketers are utilizing UGC, user-generated content. And there's dozens of more use cases. Today, basically, you can use this authentic content in almost any type of marketing use case. It's event marketing, then it's product marketing, it is e-commerce. For example, think about an e-commerce store. Of course, on the e-commerce store, you put all these shiny, glossy product photos that you as a seller produce. But if you have maybe a sidebar of 5 real, authentic photos from real customers from Instagram, that just sells better. It's authentic content that drives sales. So e-commerce is another way to make use of UGC.
So it's almost the opposite of Sprout Social, which is where you are planning your posts. This is the opposite side.
That's an interesting observation, and you're correct. It's especially interesting since Walls.io is my second company. My first company, SWOT.io, is actually more comparable to Sprout Social, a social media management platform. So you're right, while these management tools, Sprout, Sprinkler, SWOT.io, are usually focusing on the brand's own channels and offering tools to do content planning in a calendar, community management in an inbox sort of way. They are mostly managing what's coming in and out on your own channels, really focusing what everybody is talking about, your brand or your event or your e-commerce product or whatever exactly.
Are there research potentials coming out of walls.io? Because here you're bringing together data or images from all of your different platforms. Obviously, if you use it individually as a company, that's great. You can showcase this user-generated content, which is a big problem. A lot of times you just press like or you say, oh, thank you for your response. So I think this is a great way of actually showing other people, hey, other people are talking about us. And exactly with the fashion brands and that, actually showing the product on somebody in a real life location is really cool. What kind of research potential is there in it in terms of finding influences or finding trends?
Yeah. So before I answer that, I would just want to agree or confirm what you just said. The fashion example in e-commerce is super obvious, but it really works in so many use cases. Like imagine if you're selling conference tickets and you have all the raving reviews and photos from last year's event. Again, it works great. Even if you're doing employer branding, collecting posts from your team, from your employees. Again, it's always this authentic content flywheel that exposes the brand, the employer, the e-commerce store to a big audience, which again, in turn encourages more people to share their experiences, which in the ideal case gets the flywheel going. But to your question, what potential we can see in the data here, I have a balanced view on that. Obviously, it's a treasure trove for influencer marketing, for finding relevant people in your community, in your audience, among your customer base that can amplify your message. That is absolutely true. So it's very easy to observe and see who are the relevant key players who are already posting about your brand. There's also specialized tools for that. So it's not necessarily what we are currently focusing on. There's good tools out there which combine this with influencer or creator marketplaces, so that's very good. On the other side, we often get interest about, like, how shall I say, like really deep data research and analytics. And of course, here is where we have to always remind our customers that there are certain limits in terms of privacy, right? And that is something that we do care deeply about. So that means we are obtaining the data through official APIs. That is sometimes limiting. So for example, we don't get the email address of someone posting on Instagram, of course, right? So there are certain limits here, which for some marketers is sometimes a bit disappointing. But what I learned in the long term, and we're doing this since with both companies, not just Wazir, we're doing software on top of social media for more than 10 years. Of course, that's the only way to go and the only way to build a sustainable business.
In terms of the channels that you've got on walls.io, so I noticed that it's pretty much all of them. So you've got Twitter or X, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, etc., etc. Which of these channels have you seen in your own experience are growing and which ones are starting to have less traction? Because I've been seeing that obviously Instagram you'll get much fewer views than on, but the engagement rate on LinkedIn is better. Are there any new platforms coming out, or are any of these platforms, are you seeing any huge decline or huge increase?
That's super interesting. And again, I can look back at the history of almost 15 years now spending on social media platforms as a software developer. And of course, there's shifts, but interestingly, there's no big and sudden shifts, right? So I still do refer to the big five, or is it six now? So there is still Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, LinkedIn, and of course now TikTok is the six. There is basically no other platform that is relevant right now. Upstarts like Threads or Blue Sky, all these X challengers, I would almost say unfortunately don't play a big role, not at all. It's really the big five or big six if you want to count TikTok. And that is almost unchanged for the last few years, right? I mean, TikTok obviously appeared only now. LinkedIn gained in popularity. And most importantly, it's of course depending a lot on your use case, on your audience, right? So TikTok is still not relevant for every business. There's a lot of companies who do just fine without even then, like a very old school German manufacturing company suddenly create a TikTok channel to attract a new talent in recruiting, for example, right? So it is changing. One shift that we definitely saw when we started out and now I'm focusing on UGC again. So my prior statement was more like a general observation in social media and social media marketing. But when you look at UGC, of course, there was shifts. When we started out, back then it was still Twitter was by far the most dominant player. Instagram took over that role. So when we look into our data, we see that 2 years ago, maybe even more, the amount of posts that we are collecting now, Instagram is the biggest platform. What might be interesting, some of our customers were super interested to see if there is a strong decline in Twitter or X, especially since so much has changed over there in the last 1 or 2 years. I don't see that in our data. We see, especially for US customers, absolutely stable usage of X. Maybe a slow decline in Europe. That's true. In Europe, we have a little bit stronger signal there that some bigger companies, but overall it is amazingly stable. I would have also suspected that we would see bigger shifts in the last year or so, but it's not happening.
I'm interested in X because I've just got my little tick, so I've paid for my tick and I'm starting to use their Grok and a couple of their other tools to post videos and that. So it's actually much more user-friendly to start getting engaged on X. My next point, which is going to be a bit of a challenge to you, is that this is a crowded space and software. I mean, if I had to go onto your website and I had to take a screen grab and go into ChatGPT, I can say, make a website that looks like this. Tell me the code that goes into this. How are you keeping yourself up to date and maintaining customer interest? Because I have lots of software programs that I buy, and every month, and I've got generally 2 that are similar, and I try and leave one because the competitor has brought up some new fantastic add-ons. But then the next month, that company will bring in the same add-ons plus one. How are you managing this fast rate of churn of customers in terms of building new services? How are you doing that? Is it through customer loyalty? Is it by your service? Is it by adding new? What value adds are you doing to reduce your churn?
That's the toughest question of all, I would say. And for both my companies, Swat.io and Was.io, we are now in a software category that is absolutely saturated. When we started with social media tools 10, 15 years ago, we were not the first movers, to be honest, but we were very early, especially in Europe, in German-speaking markets. But nowadays, of course, there are dozens of tools in both categories, social media management, UGC. It's impossible to keep up with all the tools. So competition is, I would say, one of the number one problems we face, in not just in our companies, but probably in a lot of MarTech companies right now. How do you solve that? That is the hard question. There's not one answer. There is some strategies that have been working for us after some failure, to be honest. So for Was.io, for example, we really had to realize and reconsider who is our ideal customer and refocus ourselves to that customer. What that means is 1, 2, 3 years ago, we were scared or shocked to see that we suddenly have new competitors who are like offering very similar products, at least on the surface, dramatically smaller price. For example, a competitor from India who was obviously leveraging their lower overall costs and really like kicking us out of the market with their low. It was a tough time, but we just reconsidered and thought like, hey, what is actually our advantages? What type of customer values those advantages? What use cases value those advantages? That made our addressable market much smaller, to be honest, and that feels scary because you suddenly have to say no to some people. But it allowed us to even increase our price point in this smaller target group, in this smaller niche, and actually be the number one player there. And so that is one way to see it. If there is too much competition, go a little bit more narrow, look at where you're really good at and double down on that. So that's a lot about positioning and pricing, I would say. That is one way to fight competition. You specifically asked about churn and reducing churn. And there's maybe an even tougher question. I think the only effective way to work on churn is with product, improving the product and thinking about a long-term value and maybe even lock-in. That sounds like a bad word. From a customer's perspective, from a vendor's perspective, of course, we all want to lock in a good way, of course, our customers. What that means, of course, is to provide value that you can't easily take out of your tool and put somewhere else. That usually means collecting data, customer data, and not use it for something else, but use it to build value for your customer out of that data. So, for example, if we are collecting UGC for a brand year over year, we have a treasure trove of things. What you mentioned before is a perfect example. We can use these posts from 2 years to identify influencers or potential creators. We can bubble up the best content. We can give advice what content works well, and so on. We can offer a customer to have like a historic archive or a pool of content that they don't have anywhere else, right? So features that are sort of long-term oriented or maybe even a lock-in, and they can help reducing churn. But I will be honest, especially with Was.io, churn is also one of the bigger concerns. It's interesting. Our other company, Swat.io, enjoys very, very low churn numbers. That is because the software tool, naturally, the management tool, this content planning stuff, is more integrated into the day-to-day life of a social media manager. So it's more integral, I would say. And also it's usually larger teams there. And as soon as you have deployed a software product to a larger team, that is a quite good, quite effective mode against a new upcoming competitor.
I love that you talk about sort of understanding your customer better and narrowing down your focus. A lot of people, you know, when you do a Google ad and it says you can reach 10 million people or 50 million people, that's no use because you only have, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 customers. So I'm more for focusing in on those customers you can aim on. It helps your sales team, helps your marketing team get that messaging right to them. So I think it's tough to do in the beginning because you don't always know who your customer is. But I think down the line,
You're right, especially, and that's a funny, I'm happy that you mentioned that, especially, so the way you decide go to market for your company, basically you have, or at least you used to have two options. You could build a sales team that would talk to customers, do demos and contracts, or you do self-service or product-led, as we call it today, right? And the danger with, and Was.io used to be product-led exclusively for a very long time. The danger with that is that you don't really know which customer is doing what with your product. if you have a product that is like ours, which is relatively versatile, like I said before, you can use it for events, for e-commerce, for employer branding, and yet there's no need to talk to your customers because they come, do a trial, sign up, perfect, all fine. As long as you don't want to know what are they actually doing with your software, and then you suddenly discover, oh, I don't really know because I didn't do a onboarding survey or something like that, and that's a very, very hard problem. Well, because then it gets really difficult to make positioning decisions and stuff like that.
Well, I've noticed in successful SaaS businesses that the education and onboarding side become, if that's done properly, the churn is reduced and the difficulty of a customer leaving or the probability of a customer leaving is higher. And in terms of that, obviously as your business has grown, your customer care and your service department obviously must have grown as well. In terms of creating educational materials and materials for customers, how are you generating that and where are you sort of offering that?
So we are in that regard quite old school and are doing most of our educational material through a typical help center. So we are using a help desk software that also offers knowledge base functionality, and we are mostly using that to from our customer base. Of course, we have an in-app notification system that alerts about new features. That is also important, so that you have an effective way to let existing customers know, hey, there's actually something new. What we don't do yet, and what I think is something that is a challenge for us in terms of the resources it requires, we didn't really make the leap yet to go video for customer education. We tried a little, but to be honest, we are a super small team here at Walsio. We have a headcount of 20, and of course, that's big chunk is of course engineering and product creation, and of course marketing and so on, but actually it's quite hard to have enough resources to go all in on video and create a lot of tutorials and stuff like that. So we definitely can get better in that regard. So there's still lots to do.
Well, that's the nice thing of the space that you're in. There are these incremental changes that you're going to make the service offering better. So, Michael, what is next for Walls.io? I don't know what your subscriber numbers are. You don't necessarily have to tell me, but how are you going to sort of 10x your business? Is that possible?
At 10x, since we are being a bootstrap company, is a project that has a quite long runway, to be honest. So for us, we are now in the lower mid single digit ARR space. For us, the next big goal is to crack the 10 million ARR. So that would be something that is realistic on our timeline, and that is also compatible with the growth trajectory that is common or usual for bootstrap companies, right? That is a topic that I also love to speak about with my team and everyone, that we have chosen a more steady but predictable growth trajectory, not like the hockey sticks or anything like that. So a 10x is quite a lot to ask, but we are on a good path.
But you can't always predict the hockey stick, can you?
No, but like I said, I mean, we are not a startup per se anymore in terms of the number of years where we are on the market. So unless our product team comes up with a genius idea that really allows us to extend into a new market, like not just our current TAM, but doing something completely different, there is no reason to think about a hockey stick moment, quite honestly.
Okay. It's always good to dream.
Yeah, that's true. But you also need to be reasonable and know where you're playing and how you're playing, right? Bootstrapping a company from 0 to 10 million. So I think we have good goals and we are dreaming.
If you had to go, well, I mean, obviously we've all been impacted by ChatGPT. If you had an opportunity now to create an AI-based product, what would that be?
You mean so it was like from scratch, something completely new?
With the billions that ChatGPT are flushing down the toilet, you may as well use the infrastructure.
I didn't expect that question. I mean, obviously, I'm super interested in marketing and social media marketing, but I have to say I have also other interests. I'm currently thinking a lot about the personal CRM space. I'm not sure if you ever, there are some products out there. It's usually a CRM, but not for a team, not for a sales team, but more aiming like the single user. It's either a high activity networking person, or you could also think about your friendships, like a system that allows you to manage that. That is something that interests me personally, because I think there is a really good tool out there. And I see a lot of potential to use AI there. For example, a smart way to allow you to keep up with a large number of contacts, a tool that makes smart suggestions. whom you should get in touch with today. Just give me one recommendation each week or each day. That is a space I find super interesting. I think it's also connected with events. I think there's a lot of great event tech out there. Walsio is part of that. So we are very strong in event technology use cases. But what I really miss there still, with all the event apps out there, I'm still missing a really good networking app. And that also could be something that could really work well with a great AI core.
I think there's tremendous potential there. I mean, I've got a couple of thousand followers on LinkedIn, and I don't know most of them. And as you said, if there was some kind of new LinkedIn that actually went back to the foundations of LinkedIn in terms of really connected me with people that I'm really interested in. So not Tinder for LinkedIn, but something similar to that in terms of you're aligned, these are the jobs you're looking for, these events might be good for you.
Imagine you have this personal CRM with AI functionality and you can ask it questions. Like, I'm not sure, I have this constantly. Someone asks me, can you recommend me a PHP developer? And then I have to think, oh my God, I forgot. I don't know, I don't remind. And then I ask my AI, hey, please check my LinkedIn contacts, check my inbox. I need the top 3 PHP developers I had contact with in the last 3 years. Perfect.
But I know that LinkedIn restricts APIs on their platform.
That is part.
That is one of the but that might be a negative for them, because if people could actually utilize the data, because LinkedIn has a tremendous amount of data. If they just remove the telephone numbers and email addresses, because obviously you just get Indian call centers calling the whole time saying, hi, can we offer you apps? But I definitely think there's a new space. People are tired of getting happy birthday messages and congratulations message mad on.
Exactly. Of course, there's also a fine line here. So I completely agree, or I'm aware that of course, it's also a privacy and API issue. The problem is this can easily tip over. Once you're building such a product that maybe automates the message, then it gets boring again, right? So I don't want to have a world where we're all communicating through completely automated messages.
But it's not automated messages. It is giving you the right person who you
Exactly. It's about the surfacing, in my opinion. Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to have like this world where we all like where my bot talks to your bot. But I want to surface the right people with the right question at the right time, and the data is there, I'm sure, but we don't have a good way to extract it or surface it.
So plenty of exciting ideas and lots of opportunities in the future.
Yeah, but in case someone of my team is listening to this, don't worry.
That's why I was worried. I don't want to say, what's next for my...
I did run Sword.io and Walsio in parallel for quite a long time, and until I finally made the right decision to find a management team for Sword.io and focus on Walsio. I'm not going to change that in the short term, but committed now to stay focused on Walsio and UGC.
I was just thinking, I'm sure universities might be able to use Walls.io quite successfully because...
Universities are among our top customers. Whether it's a graduation ceremony or it's a more permanent installation on the website of the university. You know, universities have so many sub-use cases. They can use it for the sports teams. They can use it to attract new students. They can use it to communicate through content internally. There's endless. You're right. So universities, higher education is one of our top customer segments.
Awesome. So at least I'm getting the picture now. So I think I can see some good use cases for that. Now, before we wrap up, don't forget to show some love for From Startup to Wunderbrand by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. If you'd like to help us grow, tell your friends, share on social media, and leave us a review. For those of you who want to dive a little bit deeper into the topic, join me on Twitter @NickKuhner. Let's connect and chat about all things branding and digital. Until next time.